morning. It's kind of like old home week, seeing old friends and stuff. It's nice. Welcome to our session on student spiritual growth and mental health toward a hope-filled future. My name is Mary Beth Kearns-Barrett from the College of the Holy Cross, and I've had the pleasure of working with an amazing group of 18 colleagues from across the AJCU in a wonderful conversation that we've been having about the challenges our students are facing today and how it is that we can accompany them best toward a hope-filled future, drawing on our Ignatian tradition. So a lot of what we heard about this morning kind of gets tapped into in this session what we heard at the plenary. I just invite my colleagues who are part of the commission to stand. Not everyone is here, but a good number of them are. So if you don't mind standing, that would be great, just to recognize you and your work. And I'll turn it over to my fellow co-chair, Jennifer.
Good morning. I'm Jennifer Abe, Loyola Marymount University, and it's wonderful to see you all here. Thank you for being with us. For the work of the Commission on Student Spiritual Growth and Mental Health, we're lucky that you had a plenary session to really set the table for thinking about these matters, and we've been able to meet for several months thinking together about what we wanted to propose to you at this assembly. And what I want to point out is that we really wanted to look at this in a holistic way, connecting spirituality and mental health, not separating them. Our service delivery systems in our society and our campus, let's increase accessibility, or let's increase mental health services, let's increase our campus ministry resources. It's not against that, and how do we all create the kind of institutional ethos where we can address these issues together in a holistic, whole person approach? It's also holistic in connecting what is deeply personal with what is collective. So personal mental health struggles with collective existential realities, and seeing our students' distress as not only their own issues or histories, but also a manifestation in their own bodies and their own minds of what is happening in the world. Embodied distress. It's not just students, it's us. So as we are focusing and centering students, let us also not pretend that it's other. Okay, so we invite you into this conversation, and I just want to go over how we're going to do it. Our members of our commission are going to take you through these different elements. I'm about to turn it over to one of our members now, but after this overview, we're going to show you a film. Our director and filmmaker, Kennedy Wheatley, is here today, so you'll get to hear from students and have a chance to reflect together on that. And then we have we really want to emphasize the relational response, but also institutional. And so some members of our commission are going to introduce you to the discernment tool for looking at institutional policies and making those connections as well. So that's another holism here, that what is personal, what is collective, what is relational, what is institutional. And then we'll have some time to reflect together, that you'll have time to reflect with each other. All right, then I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Jeffrey Ng.
Thank you for being here. My name is Jeffrey Ng. I am a clinical psychologist, and I am the director for the mental health service at Fordham University. I'm delighted to see my counterpart from Loyola, David, sitting in the back here. So I'm going to just take a couple of moments to highlight for all of you some of the context and the impetus for our work, which, as I'm sure you can all imagine, stem from both the individual and the collective voices and experiences of our students. And as Jennifer mentioned a little while ago, you're going to be hearing a lot more from our students shortly in the film. But for right now, what I want to share with you all is that there is sadly plenty of anecdotal and epidemiological data, demonstrating that our students' mental health overall has been worsening and declining in the past decade or so. We also know from a lot of the data and a lot of reports from our students directly that they are reporting feeling increasingly more disconnected socially and spiritually and existentially. They are reporting feeling more hopeless and disillusioned about their futures. And all of this matters, right? All of this is concerning for a lot of reasons. But for the work that we all do, it's especially concerning because we know that mental health distress, we know that social disconnection, spiritual disconnection, hopelessness, despair, that those are all risk factors and can compromise our students' persistence, their retention, their capacities to flourish on our campuses. And again, I know that you all know this. We also know that a lot of these trends that we're seeing with our students' mental health and sense of disconnection are in part attributable to and perpetuated by social, ecological, institutional, systemic structures and stressors, which my colleague at Fordham, Akane, will speak more to. I was distracted by the blinds. I'm a little sorry.
Hi, everyone. My name is Akane Zisha. I'm at Fordham University. And as Jeffrey just talked about, we are witnessing a marked increase in the number of students who are experiencing mental health problems. And one of the things that we've learned through the work on this commission is that there are multiple factors that contribute to this, right? But we cannot deny that institutional factors play a crucial role. When students are challenged by policies that add to their financial stress, their academic pressures, when students don't feel like they're not seen or heard on campus, when mental health resources are lacking on campus, all of these things, right, contribute to worsening students' mental health. And when we also looked into the research on this, we came to appreciate that isolated interventions are not enough. What we really need are broad, multi-level institutional changes. And the good news is that this is something that we can do, right? I don't know about you, but I sometimes feel helpless to affect change in this, world that we're living in right now. But we have the power to change policies. We created them, so why can't we change them? And more importantly, as we heard in the opening session, we believe that Jesuit institutions in particular are uniquely suited to address the crisis in mental health. We have some of the most caring and student-centered administrators, faculty, and staff in the world. We have a mission that focuses on relationships, right, on caring for the whole person, on spirituality. All of these are protective factors. But I don't think we often have the time, or rather we don't take the time to deeply listen to our students and to discern how our longstanding policies might actually be negatively impacting students' mental health. And so we're here today to invite you to commit to making meaningful changes with us, to ensure that our institutions meet the challenges of the moment, and to find ways in which we could improve the environment so that all of our students thrive mentally, spiritually, and academically. And we're going to provide 2 concrete tools to do this. And the first one is the Circle of Hope protocol, which is also available on our website. So I'm going to turn it back over to Mary Beth.
So when we began our work as a commission, what we felt was most important that we center student voices. And since this is a conference designed for faculty and staff, we felt we really needed to find a way to bring the students into the conversation, even though they wouldn't be physically present. Over time, what that became was creating a film that Kennedy Wheatley here directed for us, based on gathering of students from across the AJCU that was held last July at the National Jesuit Student Leadership Conference, where we introduced to them a way of proceeding that we had developed at Holy Cross for another purpose, and then that Jennifer tried out at LMU, where we invited students to participate in what we called a Circle of Hope, where the inner circle was our own students responding to the questions, what gives you hope, what diminishes your hope, and what are you needing from faculty, staff, and other administrators to help accompany you in a hope-filled future, as you build a hope-filled future. So as we were thinking about that, we wanted to hear students' own responses. And on the outer rim of the perimeter of the circle, we invited faculty, staff, and administrators to sit in and listen. And we're inviting you to be those people listening today. And when we invite you to listen, we're asking you to listen really from a spirit of discernment of what am I hearing in these students that I don't hear when it's just in a quick conversation and they tell me they're having a rough day? Or what am I noticing happens in me when I hear the students speak the way they do right now? And how can I allow this moment to touch me and transform me, and not just how can I solve their problem, but so to really take a contemplative stance as we listen to the students. And so we'll share with you the film, which we are so grateful to Kennedy for all her work and helping us put together.
We're having a conversation about hope. We're talking about the importance of hope in our lives and how we can find hope together.
We rarely take the time to sit and slow down.
This is a very rare opportunity to get to listen to people candidly speak and be vulnerable about this kind of topic.
The circle arrangement is just so that we're able to have a close-knit, more comfortable conversation with each other. The administrators are placed on the outside of the circle really to hear the students' concerns and also the students' needs. And I think that's really helpful because that way administrators can learn from the students and take back things to really help their administration at other colleges and universities. It's difficult to talk about these issues, especially like when it comes to hope, because it's a big topic. And it's a deep one, and I feel like it's just not an easy thing to talk about, especially for those that sometimes may feel hopeless.
Just thank you all for being here, first of all. So we'll give you guys like a second to reflect. So what actually diminishes your hope?
For me, I think it's just turning on the news. I feel like you always see like these terrible news stories and you're only one person, so what can you really do to fix everything?
Today there's like a lot of negativity going around oftentimes, and that can definitely make it difficult to see what kind of like the light at the end of the tunnel.
People aren't talking, they're just yelling at each other. And I think that, especially when you see that in our government and everything, it gets really depressing really fast when you see that, you know, the people that are supposed to be working for us can't even work with each other.
We are becoming more deaf, sensitivity-wise, emotionally, as a culture, like as a group of people.
It's like, oh, there's another school shooting. And not being able to do anything about it. It's really difficult to try to repair something that wasn't really the fault of your generation. And you're only one person, so like, sure, you can recycle, but it's not going to change the world unless everyone does something together.
The constant access to media and access to everything wrong in the world, I think, is contributing to a culture of like apathy. And I don't even, it's not even the fault of the person. Like, you're getting so much information about so much tragedy and trauma happening in the world that I feel like sometimes I can't fix everything, so I can't care about anything.
I think it's important to remind administrators of how much power they hold. Administrators are equipped with the ability to empower students and give them hope. And they're also equipped with the ability to diminish their hope and destroy it.
It does diminish my hope when, I guess, older adults don't believe in you. Being told that your ambitions might be too big, just kind of people who think you're young, you're too naive, you don't really know what you're talking about.
Especially like on campus, professors, administrators, and students are coming to them with issues that they find on campus or even in the classroom, and administrators actively choose to ignore what they're saying. That to me is instilling a sense of, I guess, caution and fear in the students to speak up.
Coming to a Jesuit campus, I felt very included and supported within our community, within the Jesuit ideals in like our chaplain's office. And then for me, when I step off campus, it's when I really start to feel challenged by the Catholic Church and feeling not included and seeing the ways that nothing has changed.
When times are changing, we just don't want to accept it, where traditions are good, but there comes a time when you need to change those in order to just grow as a whole.
I don't understand why the way someone else lives their life impacts you so much when you're not the one who has to walk in their shoes.
What diminishes my hope, honestly, is representation or lack of it, honestly. I feel like there's a lot of burden on the people that are in the marginalized communities because we have to, or at least I feel like I have to take on kind of like the weight of the people that also share my identity and be kind of a spokesperson, whether that's to an administration person or to just a community of people who are looking at it and asking for a perspective.
I read and write in Braille. I'm visually impaired, so this is my mode of reading, writing, and emailing and connecting with my professors. And I find that when I don't have some sort of interpersonal relationship with my professors, it makes difficulties for me and discomfort when I do run into issues with the academic stuff. So I feel that disconnection is my robbery of hope.
We're taking that breath in between answers and honoring what people have said.
And I think it's good that we try to normalize more of this type of conversation.
What diminishes my sense of hope is when individuals don't see the potential that they have. I think I'm my biggest enemy at times.
Feeling as if I'm stagnant, can't go anywhere, not improving whatsoever. I feel like the door is closed. I feel like that makes me lose my sense of hope.
I don't feel like I have a purpose, whether it's with a group of people or even with like friends, and I feel like, okay, like I can't, maybe I'm not adding anything.
And the way that I kind of visualize it is that it's a domino effect. So like one bad thought kind of leads to another, leads to another, leads to another, and then I just can't get myself out of that loop.
We all suffer failures, but there are moments where you just can't get back up on your feet following your failures.
I also feel sometimes like there are things that I would work towards to like see a better world, but is it ever going to be enough?
Despite some of the challenges that you guys all spoke about, what gives you hope, and where do you find hope?
What gives me hope is being in spaces just like this,
when I meet someone and immediately they're willing to accept me for who I am, that makes me feel seen and that makes me feel more confident in myself, like I actually have something to say that people want to hear.
I find what gives me hope is definitely the relationships that I have in my life, not only the current ones, but the ones that I no longer have.
It's always nice to be met with people who can essentially be the ally for me when my voice isn't being heard or my voice and my perspective isn't being respected as much as it should be. And especially being one of the only people that looks like myself and holding those identities.
My dad gives me the most hope. He kind of made his own way in his own life. He created his own story, and it gives me the confidence that I can do that too, where he started a little bit from the bottom and like there wasn't too much support. It just makes me believe in myself a little bit more than what I could have been. And just like those little things of like, hey, what are you doing? And then I tell him, and then he's like, I am proud of you, and I love what you're doing, and he's like, I can never do that. And I think that it's amazing that he supports me that way.
I've really learned over the past year by being involved in leadership activities, the power in reflective habits, and it allows us to grow. It allows our perceptions of other people to grow.
I learned a lot more about my spirit. I wasn't raised in education through the Jesuit system, so to have that in the collegiate experience has definitely challenged myself to push my spirit to another level, to find solidarity with people, and to find community through my faith as well.
I was really struggling at one point, like with myself, with my identity, and just who I was growing into. And I felt like I was coming back at odds with myself. And my mom just, like, we're always going to church on Sunday, but there was one day where she was just like, let's really go to church, really sit with me. And usually I'm just, I'm there, I'm like, and I'm like, every now and then, but I, just really sat one day, and I really just, I just listened, and it was just there. And there was no fun, there was nothing, no distraction, it was just me, and I was the only person in the room. And that was probably the first time that I really just went to church. And I was just like, after I was like, and I think just that space gives me hope. All these people, just.
Something that gives me hope is thinking about my 18-year-old self who came into college, how much I've grown throughout my time in college, and how much I know that I can continue to grow.
Any action that you do contributes to your future. Anything that you put into your life is what the outcome is. So I feel like all these endless possibilities of what future can be like, I feel like that gives me hope. Just my future, my life going forward.
Growth is not linear. It kind of is sideways, up and down. There is hope in our relationships and the connections we have.
Instead of just conquering this big, ginormous world by ourselves, we have a community and we have a family. And I really do value that Jesuit spirituality.
I feel like everyone thinks about themselves, but also in a greater perspective, like a bigger society, you know what I mean? Like in reality, we are all one if we really look at this. I feel like how everyone's just so together. I love that. I love that.
By talking about hope, we walk away with more hope. By learning about others, we learn more about ourselves. Hope needs to be cultivated all over the campus, in the classroom, in the dorms, in the residence halls, in the dining hall.
How can chaplains, mentors, professors, general adults within your communities best accompany you in the creation of hope-filled futures?
Students can sometimes be fearful about talking about these kind of things and having difficult conversations because disagreement and conflict and confrontation, that's all scary. But we have to learn not to be scared of it so we can grow.
Like the interpersonal connection that you have with your professors especially, or administrators, is so important. And I think that sometimes when you don't have that, it can be really hard to go and ask for help or to ask for advice or to ask for really anything.
I grew up in a family full of catchphrases, and I think one that stuck, my mom always says, my grandfather said it to her, and then it's kind of passed in my generation, is showing up is all you need, in peace and quiet, showing up with the pure intention of just to listen.
I want you to show up and I want to see your face because we're fighting and working for the same things.
I think that means the absolute world to us. You know, when young people try and speak up, we're dismissed and put to the side and say, we're too young, or you don't know enough, or you haven't been through enough. Well, we just went through a global pandemic at some of the most formative years of our lives. We've seen many things throughout our lifetime. So we do have these experiences that are worth hearing.
There is this stigma around our generation sometimes where they think that we don't actually know what we're talking about and we don't do our research.
I think it's important to put people over profit and to think about what our institution's impact on the world is going to be, looking where our money is invested and who that's going to be impacting. As you mentioned earlier, one of your biggest diminishes of hope is bridging like the disconnect between the community outside of the school and our bubble of campus.
Administrators have such a huge sway on how students see the next 10, 15, 20 years of their lives. So they should be more conscious of how they talk to students.
Like when we first came here, there's a woman that said, you guys are meant to be here. You wouldn't be here without a reason. I still think about those words to this day because sometimes I be feeling I'm not meant to be here. I feel imposter syndrome. I feel like I'm not smart enough. But those words, I always constantly remind me. I feel like just words of encouragement help and they go a long way.
I feel like they could motivate us and encourage us to become the best version of ourselves. It just feels kind of nice to like be perked up and say, oh, you can like do great things and you know what you can do and you can get there.
Giving us the grace to make mistakes and learn from them. It's a great opportunity to be like instructed how to do something right the first time, but a lot of the time there is no one right way to do something, and so just having the freedom and the space to try something, make a mistake, do something wrong, learn from it, and be able to do better the next time.
We can all teach each other a lot of things if we just sat and listened.
Just understanding that we're all human and that we're all having human experiences no matter what point in time we're at in our lives. And just being someone that we can rely on just to understand what we're going through.
I think just listening. Listening is probably the most important thing that you can do.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Angelica Quiñones. I'm the Director of University Ministry at the University of San Francisco. I would like to invite us into a moment of reflection. And you can feel free to close your eyes for a few seconds or jot some notes down. I would like for you to place yourself as a member of that outer circle, listening to these students. Think about what stays with you. What did you hear? What are you feeling? What did you learn from these students? What is staying with you?
and cutting these conversations short, but there'll be plenty of time after as well, hopefully, to continue them. My name is Gabriel Velez, and I'm with Marquette University, and I wanted to give us just a couple minutes for 2 or 3 folks to share maybe some of what they were sitting with after watching the video and we're just talking about with your peers. So do we have any brave souls who would like to jump in and share their thoughts with us? Yes, thank you.
So Sean Chrysler at the Warren College. And one of the things that the 3 of us have been talking about at Lemoyne, and I think we saw it in the video, and it could be hard to digest that for most of us, the pedagogy around student engagement is really designed for them to come to us. And there is a level of vulnerability and rejection in the hierarchy change and of us coming to them. And so the 3 of us have been talking about this notion that we have to release ourselves from the idea that our open door means that they will come in as an invitation, and that we have to be more aggressive in the sense of our love to go get them, right? To create these relationships, to invite them into a space, to have conversations so that when they see the door open, they know that that invitation is based on a relationship that already exists and not an assumption for possible rejection.
Yeah, I really like that. At Fordham, folks at Fordham know this, I'm one of the resident ministers in one of the residence halls. And so I met with some of the RAs there. And one of them just volunteered. He said, it would be really helpful if we just had a place where we could talk and we would be listened to. And I talked to Jeff about it, and I like that because it would mean we, the adults in the community, go to them where they live and open spaces for conversation. We don't wait. I mean, we have to have both, right? We have to have a counseling center and a campus ministry center where people come, but then also find places where and residence halls or prime spaces to actually go in and be proactive about it. I like that.
Thank you. We'll do 2 more here and then to the back.
Okay, so following on with the conversations that we've heard before right now, I had a concern about this because I had an incident that will happen to me whereby I do love engaging with my students and talking about all of these things, because I'm a sociology professor too. So this is the nature of our course. However, what did happen to me is that I was called out once on having favoritism. However, that was a discussion I was just sharing right now with my partner, that yes, I see that we shouldn't have that hierarchy. We should be inviting, but my concern is where or should there be any boundaries? Because when that was called out for having favoritism in the classroom, my first thought was, will my professionalism be questioned? Then how about my ethics, my work ethics? And so all of those concerns came on when I was said, oh, I had favorites in the class. I was glad that the student approached me and said they felt that way, but what I responded was that I am available to everyone, I said. But also what I recognize is that you should have a proactive approach. I make it clear in class, I'm very friendly, I'm approachable, and if others have felt that they can approach, then you should also take a proactive approach, I said. And I make myself available through many mediums. I said, if you don't feel comfortable talking to me in the classroom, I have office hours and you can email me and I can always set the meeting with you. But now listening, having that hierarchy, I don't want to have that, but also I don't want my professionalism to be questioned or my academic integrity to be questioned, especially with grading and students as part of faculty, But also, you have that inclination to really do engage with students because you realize that there's many things going on at home beyond what they come and do in class. For instance, I'm from Belize and we have many challenges. It's a third world country. So many of our students are focusing on what their next meal is going to be versus whether they're going to turn in their sociology essay on time. And I can't be upset about that because that's the social reality that we face. So you do want to walk with them, but also in my position as part of faculty, I don't want my academic integrity to be questioned. So it's how do we find that balance, you know? That's amazing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Hi, Madeline. I'm from Georgetown, and I think this highlights really nicely some gaps in what I think is the predominant clinically oriented mental health model at many of our schools. And so my background's in student affairs. I transitioned to mission and ministry about a decade ago. And I think what these students were sharing and reflecting on was incredible, but not really all or mostly clinical in nature. And I think in some ways, in our efforts to destigmatize seeking mental health support, I don't want to call it an overcorrection, but we see that our clinical services are massively oversubscribed and may have wait lists when not every student challenge is clinical in nature. And so again, my bias is around campus ministry, and to me, campus ministry is positioned really well in that we provide the kind of spiritually integrative meaning making that these students are talking about, but that we know positively scaffolds student well-being. And so for me, this raises questions about what we do as campus ministry and our ministerial professionals in serving the non-clinical mental health and wellness needs of our students without falling into the student affairs wellness wheel model, where we think of spirituality just as like mindfulness and meditation and reflection. When we know that it's much deeper and richer than that, particularly to our students who are Muslim or Jewish or Catholic or from our many Christian traditions. And so to me, campus ministry can provide immediate support, right? So our 25 residential ministers serve in an on-call rotation to provide community care in moments of crisis. And I also think we're positioned to be that preclinical stopping point for students, which then frees up clinical hours for the students who are really in dire need of these services. And I haven't met a colleague from an institution yet who has said that their CAPS clinicians have an excess of hours available for students. So I appreciated the video. Thank you.
Thank you for that as well. I would love to respond in the spirit of listening openly and just hearing. I'm not, but I'm going to encourage everyone to continue these conversations and hear more from different colleagues. Even that diversity of those four perspectives, I think, really speaks to the richness that we're hoping this video would generate. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Susan, who will take us into the next part.
Hello, folks. How are you doing? Oh wow, just a quiet murmur of nothingness. No. Is everyone sorry, I always check in with classes immediately after I showed a video to them, so just doing the same. I'm Dr. Susan Harmon. I'm the Associate Director of the Center for Engaged Learning, Teaching, and Scholarship here at Loyola. In my role, I coordinate the University Service Learning Program, our faculty development programs, and many, many eons ago, I used to be on the student affairs side of the House and Campus Ministry, so that's what I bring to the table. As part of our commission's work, as we were trying to sort of respond to these things, again, we took in a great deal of data, a lot of study, again, listened, we're able to sort of watch some of the narratives that the Community's wonderful video was able to put in front of us in addition to our own experiences. And then subcommittees were formed, and we were the subcommittee that was tasked with the institutional response. So how do we as institutions respond to gigantic structural elements and aspects, such as the fact that all of our students have been doing active shooter drills since they started formal schooling, right? Just let that sit in if that is not sort of an aware reality for you all. And so as our subcommittee met to say sort of like, all right, you all just figure out what the institutional response needs to be to fix all of this. We stopped for a moment and thinking we came in and a lot of our work was trying to sort of reframe, there's this narrative of the fragility of our students, right? And again, I think it ignores this really essential context that they find themselves in that I know was not operative for me when I was a college student. And as we started to talk about it, what sort of began to surface was all of our own contexts are so profoundly different. We are in a beautiful, wonderful shared family and network that shares a shared charism, and yet I know that the students at St. Peter's are different than the students at BC. The students at CLU have a different community and spirit than the students at Georgetown. I worked at Wheeling Jesuit of happy memory, and that community and those students were very different than the community I find myself in the past 12 years at Loyola Chicago. And so sort of holding that together, we realized that if we were to sort of offer a blanket, here's the thing to do to combat the massive wave of mental health crisis and loneliness in one silver bullet, it would be so milquetoast as to not have sort of any meaning and likely would be unhelpful in each of our contexts. And so doing that reflection, and I want to give full credit to Michelle Cheatham at Loyola Maryland, who's sadly not able to join us today. She offered forward sort of this tool and said, we did this reflective exercise, and we really sort of specifically around DEI policy, and then that got us into conversations about the fact that all too often we may be the most dedicated, Ignatianly formed, fully committed to the spirit of the dignity and recognition of the humanity of our students, individuals possible, but the policies that we are implementing and instituting deeply dehumanize and disenfranchise students from the very spirit of what we hope to inculcate in them, right? And how often do we think about changing, moving, and reflecting upon these policies? And so what would it look like for us to, and again, going back to the Ignatian pedagogical paradigm's first beginning moment is context, right? Context is king. Context is in the spirit of Ignatius saying that God is speaking through your lived reality, your current existent reality to speak to you. Let's allow all of our institutions to begin from that place of context. And so we wanted to provide a tool that you should have in front of you that's on our website for sure. And also full credit goes to the genius of our colleague Akane, who laid this out. It's spectacular. But the other thing is we meant it to be something that is used, right? And so how often have you found yourself sort of getting a tool that is not friendly, does not invite you to walk through things? But what if we tapped into our tradition and brought that essential Ignatian spirit of discernment, brought that eye to our policies? I don't know about you all, but I feel like when we're doing policy review, all too often it's happening in a reactive mode, right? How many of us are revising our free speech and expression policies this summer? Yeah, just a couple of us. The other piece as well, or if that's happening, it's reactive, or it might be sort of linked along the lines of accreditation, which is a thing that no one is excited for. So sometimes it can be linked to experiences that maybe, I won't say drudgery, but maybe we're less enthusiastic to participate in, as opposed to this idea of discernment being an ongoing, intentional, reflective process. And so this was meant both to provide some sort of a space, but also some reflective questions, but to do so, again, within that Ignatian charism, bringing that wisdom of our tradition to this, to just sort of say, okay, let's stop. What if we gave ourselves the gift of stopping for a second? Knowing that is not always going to be an opportunity and availability in every single situation, but what if it was? What if we took the time occasionally? What if this became part of our own practice? But also highlighting a couple of other essential elements. One, in addition to the fact that discernment is intentional, it is ongoing, and it is reflective, it is also dialogical. When we are in discernment, even as individuals within the exercises, we are in the experience of prayer and dialogue with God first and foremost, but also in a deep and profound way with the community, sometimes represented by our spiritual director for the folks who've done the exercises, but certainly all the folks who have formed and shaped us. So asking ourselves whose additional voice needs to be at the table as we think about these policies, who they impact, whose spirit and voice needs to be there as well. The other space as well is, we really wanted to highlight is, and again, Anna spoke to this before, discernment is between two goods, right? Discernment is not between a good choice and an evil choice. Ignatian said if it was a decision between a good choice and an evil choice, just don't do the evil thing, right? It's fairly simple, right? Don't do that. So instead it was between two goods, with this recognition, right? One, that higher education is a moving and shaping landscape. And so sometimes we might find ourselves holding on to a policy when we might look and upon reflection realize perhaps it is doing tremendous harm in a way that we did not anticipate. Many of us work at institutions that decades ago had policies on the books that invited both students in queer relationships and students who found themselves to be pregnant to stop matriculating at their institution. And I'm sure, to a certain extent, some of those policies may have been put in place with the spirit of what at the time was considered to be care. Now, we have lived into the fullness of understanding how God is revealing themselves in our students, and I think we have revised those, right? But what would it look like for us to sort of go back to some of these policies, and in the spirit of discernment to say, no one put in place an add drop policy that is actually making a lot of students, right, potentially putting them in a position where they are leaving the university with a tremendous amount of debt with the intention of harming folks, right? No one says, you know what I'm gonna do? Put in place an incomplete policy that really makes sure, right, that it is as difficult as possible for a student who is experiencing personal difficulties to ever actually be able to complete a course. That is not the intention. And so when we discern have that eye to it, like it takes the blame away and just allows for us to say like, hey, if this is maybe, can we be doing more good here, right? Can we follow the spirit of Magis to something that's leading us more deeply into something? And that's the lens that which we take it. And finally, with the eye to discernment, this idea of discernment needs to lead to concrete action, right? It's not simple reflection, which is a simple and wonderful thing to do in our tradition. But the exercise is we do a discernment towards an election, right? Towards a movement towards something. And also in the spirit as well, an imaginative, concrete action should be our end results. My research is on civic education and the importance of imagination. And I think that is one of our truest and best gifts that we can give both to our students but to ourselves as well. What if this was not just the way it had to be, right? What if there was something better beyond that? So I want to invite you all to take a moment and just reflect on both what you saw in the video, again, give us another second for that, but thinking about like the potential of this tool, again, not as a silver bullet, but are there, you know, is there a policy, are there places, are there spaces, right, in where we ourselves, in the face of systemic and structural, just overwhelming odds, can actually have agency, can use, again, what Ignatius would call our freedom to make action to move towards goodness, right? Like, where is that space? So I invite you all to, again, turn to one another and chat about that for a little bit, but what's striking you from the video? So I know we've interrupted, again, very rich conversations, but just as a reminder, we still have time together, and also more importantly, we belong in a wonderful connected family with one another. So I hope, again, that these conversations won't just end here in this room or on our campus, but would love to hear, again, fruits, reflections from folks, maybe as you're thinking about what's surfacing for you all.
So, Kevin Berg from Regis in Denver, Colorado. Jennifer, this is great. It's a really good tool. We were just talking about policy at both of our schools where if the students live within 25 miles of the school, they have to live on campus for their first 2 years. And some students really find that a burden. For us, as we become a Hispanic serving institution, that really raises some problems for people who need to be with their families. So, just a great example of where this could be useful. Now my question, my issue. In our increasingly secularized campuses, people read discernment and they just think, oh, this is just good old-fashioned decision-making. And it's not. It's decision-making in the presence, let me put it this way, of a God.
Yeah.
And if we can't get the religious dimension in there, we're not going to be doing this.
And Kevin, I think that thread connects back so deeply and wonderfully, right, to our earlier keynote this morning. And so for me, I 100% agree with you, which is why when I wrote this stuff, I was sort of like, this is discernment. This is not the average policy analysis tool. It has to have a completely different spirit to it, right? We have to situate it within this frame. But I think what it also speaks to is the need of like, we are continuing to speak to our students. I need this advice, right? I need this thought in my life. Or we also need to cultivate these communities for faculty on campus. I do faculty development. And I try to be one of those people that welcomes people into mission and uses language that like invites them in. And also, but it is that delicate dance of like, there's a chemistry professor who I absolutely love on Loyola's campus, and dedicated pedagogue, incredible, cares about the students deeply. We've been working together for 7 years, and the person is just mission allergic, right? But like, it is my goal, and I am dug in for the long haul, right? Because this individual is living the mission, but is spooked by this. But I have faith that there is room, right? But we also, I don't yield what I know to be my lived reality, the experience and value that I have in this. And how do we, in a loving and invitational way, say, this is not just a newfangled tool for policy development. This is part of the tradition we're in, and it is rooted in a world-affirming, right? World-affirming, Christocentric viewpoint, but that Christocentric viewpoint is rooted in love. And I believe that we can invite you into this experience of love. Anyway, sorry, that was that.
I just wanted to share a little bit of my dissertation research and scholarly research because it fits so much with this conversation that we're having right now. And so one of the recent book chapters I wrote was about fostering spiritual development of undergrads in the classroom. And part of why I was focusing on the classroom is because in this particular point in time, going back to the point that was made a moment ago, is we have so many students who are not as interested in religion as they were in prior generations. But research clearly shows that there's a close connection between psychological well-being and spirituality. So if students aren't going to have that spiritual development opportunity within religious contexts, how are we going to provide it? If they're not seeking out campus ministry, how are we going to provide it? And the one space where all students are is classes. And so an interesting thing to consider is there's also research showing a link between spiritual growth and service learning. And so service learning occurs in classroom settings, or community-based learning, as many classes or campuses call it. And of course, community-based learning is a form of Ignatian pedagogy. So going back to our prior speaker, it just points to the idea of maximizing our embrace of what we have to offer in a unique way. And if we embrace Ignatian pedagogy more, this may be an avenue similar to service learning where we can foster spiritual growth among undergrads and potentially foster psychological well-being because there is such a close relationship between spiritual growth and psychological well-being. So just wanted to throw that out there, something to imagine this idea of how can we bring it into our classroom settings more, these opportunities for spiritual growth.
As a coordinator of service learning at Loyola University Chicago, I'm not going to fight anything you just said. Other comments and reflections?
Sometimes spiritual discernment, I think, has to happen outside of institutional policy. I'm thinking about at Fordham on May 1st, we had a group of students who were protesting the war in Gaza. And the president and the cabinet, we were all kind of figuring out on the fly how to handle this situation. The two goods were wanting to keep the students and the university safe because there were people gathering outside who were banging on the windows and were afraid they could, burst in and whatever. Keeping the students safe, but on the other hand, supporting the students in expressing their voices, which we heard, it gives them hope to be heard in their voices. So trying to kind of do that, but without a policy to govern that, and trying to discern the best way forward in the moment as it was happening. And fortunately, the president, Tanya Tetlow in our case, has a background in discernment, and she was able to kind of guide us in making decisions. And then some of us actually went down and met with the students and heard what they had to say. So somehow we got through the moment, but of course it's messy. There's no easy way to go through that. But that's sometimes how discernment happens.
As I don't need to remind members of the Society of Jesus in the room, right? Like discernment is an ongoing muscle and skill that we develop, and it's a lived into experience, right? And so how do we encourage this to become an embodied way of life, right? I think I'm going to flip it over to Marcus.
Thanks, Susan. Hi, everyone. My name is Marcus Mesher. I'm a Catholic moral theologian at Xavier University in Cincinnati. And one of the things that I really appreciated about working on this commission was that we, after listening to our students in the hope of really trying to accompany them, and then with the aspiration of trying to advocate for them. And we broke into 3 different subcommittees. We tried to target responses on the individual level and maybe thinking beyond just the clinical model, as we heard from Madeline earlier. And then you see the discernment tool that was produced by the institutional subcommittee. And I think they're held together, the micro and the macro are held together at the interpersonal level. Aristotle said a long time ago that we are what we repeatedly do. And it turns out that social scientists today tell us he was mostly right. And that actually formation happens not just, through a pattern of choices that become, habits and build character, but our deepest formation happens in relationships and through shared ritual. So it's actually more true to say we are what we repeatedly do together. So as I've been listening to you today, I've been thinking a lot about General Congregation 36, when the Jesuits acknowledged that they were confronted with this question of why don't the spiritual exercises change us as much as we want them to? And thinking about, why aren't we more free to change according to our deepest desires? And of course, change is really hard, right? Like, we all have fears and insecurities and anxieties and uncertainties. But listening to the students in the video, I heard more than that. I heard a sense of apathy or futility or so much isolation that they feel overwhelmed. And so I think that kind of points more toward the sacred moments that the video ends with, of trying to foster a sense of meaningful connection, that invites them into a richer, fuller, embodied and interconnected, interdependent spirituality. I teach a class at Xavier called Spirituality and Solidarity, and when I ask my students to define spirituality, they kind of give me like a commercial for Oprah Winfrey, live your best life, like buy this product and then you'll be happy or comfortable or content, or it'll give you your zen away from the craziness of life. But they don't really talk about relationships. They don't talk about what we inherit from our nation tradition in terms of things like contemplation, taking a long, loving look at the real to try to see the world as God does, with eyes full of love, to see the good that's in and around us. And for St. Ignatius of Loyola, freedom comes from this deep sense of being infinitely and unconditionally loved by God. That's how we are moved in freedom, once we are assured of that infinite and unconditional love. And so I think, in our approach to the spiritual development and the mental health of our students, it's incumbent on us to help students see that they are more than what the world tells them, especially when so much of that might be contingent on the volume and velocity of their interactions online, or feeling like if they say the wrong thing, they'll be judged or canceled or cut off, to help them see that dignity is infinite and unshakable. And then to, from that place of embracing their dignity and their agency and moving toward freedom, then inviting them into the kinds of relationships marked by mutual respect and genuine concern to build the conditions for trust so that people can be vulnerable and authentic together. Because change is hard, right? And there's a sociologist at Penn, Damon Centola, who talks about how we think about change all wrong. We think that we just need to do all these awareness campaigns. Like, we just need to tell people about the problem. And if we give people enough information, they'll care about it. And of course, we know this is not true, right? Like, think about all the problems you're aware of and that we don't do anything about. He calls that the fireworks model of just like, we're going to send all of this information out there and it's going to move people magically to care or invest themselves in some way. He contrasts that fireworks model with what he calls the fishing net model, right? Where you're leveraging the latent ties, or you're building on networks of belonging that already exist and using those to build more inclusive networks of belonging and saying, I care about this. And because you care about me, I want you to care about this too. And then we can care about this together. Right? And I think when we see that connection is the way through and we really leverage those relationships, it gives us opportunities to ritualize hope. rituals are language of community. And if we take seriously, that we are what we repeatedly do together, our hope is that as you sit with what you heard today or what you're thinking about now is you think beyond just the discernment tool, how can we ritualize hope on our campus? Hope not as the presumption that everything's going to be fine and turn out well, but as that midpoint between despair and presumption, that conviction that there is good worth fighting for. And so that's our hope, that you look for ways to invite other people to share in the work of ritualizing hope together.
Thank you, Marcus. So we're going to close, and I want to return to what we started with, thinking of these issues, spiritual growth, mental health, from a very holistic, holding the whole. In our fragmented, siloed spaces, stepping back and using the riches of our tradition to do so, to think about hope, to think about these issues, and to connect hope to action. I'm not going to talk about action in terms of programs, strategies, initiatives. I want to talk about it in terms of the web of relationships. And not even as leveraging, but it's in relationships that we're going to make it through this time. In psychology, hope at an individual level is agency and a pathway forward. What does that mean at a collective level? How do we develop collective agency? Through communal ritual, through fostering trust, vulnerability, belonging, to create a pathway forward. And a pathway forward from our tradition is not just, I'm going to have an impact and create change. It is, I am a word spoken into the universe once, loved by God, sent forth. What is my word? What is my contribution? How do I participate? So scaling becomes something that we have to let go of. What is big? What is small? What is enough? What is important? What we are called to is what our own vocation, our own contribution, our own way of contributing and connecting and trusting that we are participating in the ongoing co-creation of the world, right? That it is not just on us, that our action is not about just creating the best strategy, but really digging into who are we to be and how do we communicate and connect with each other as we move forward. It is not enough to work with students on awareness. It's crushing them. It's crushing all of us. Hope needs action to flourish. But action is not just about doing. So how do we be the kinds of people, the kinds of community that can engender hope, not just for our students, but with each other? It's our relationships. It's that joy. I mean, we got to experience a taste of that together. Strangers 18 months ago, but who knows what we're going to do, but we're going to keep following it. And so in these communities where we can act very locally, there's a possibility. And that's just what we're asking here, that you open yourselves to your own invitation and to your own possibilities on your campuses. Thank you. We're going to ask you to use a QR code, give us feedback. It won't take long, and if you're interested in resources, the discernment tool, further conversation, this will allow us to keep connected to you as well. Thank you very much.